U.S. Representative Buddy Carter, welcome to Editorial Interchange.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, we know too, let's just get this out of the way right away because everybody asks, is he related to President Jimmy Carter? And I think that answer is a firm no. Is that correct?
No, I am not. I tell people all the time, I'm the right Carter.
I love it. You're the Carter on the right.
That's right.
Well, one of the things we love to do at Editorial Interchange is highlight locally owned businesses in our area. Do you have a local business in your area that you'd love to highlight?
Well, I'm going to highlight Southern Soul Barbecue. I suspect many of your people have heard of it if they've ever been on St. Simon's Island. It is famous for its barbecue. It's award-winning, as a matter of fact, one of the best barbecue places in the South. And I eat there often, and when I'm home, I'm just not home that much anymore. But when I am home, I try to eat there often. There are great people there, and the food is and the barbecue is just outstanding.
Well, that's excellent because everybody heads down that way. So if you're in St. Simon's looking for some sun and some fun and some good barbecue, you know where to go now. Thanks, Representative. We appreciate you doing that.
Sure.
For the Georgians who don't know you, well, you're in the southern part of the state. Could you give us some background on yourself and maybe some of your political journey?
Right. Well, first of all, Savannah is my home. It's where I've lived all my life and where I intend to live the rest of my life. Now, I did move from Savannah to St. Simon's a couple of years ago. My mother-in-law is 97 now, so we had to get closer to her. My wife takes care of her. Of course, there are worse places to be than St. Simon's, trust me. But nevertheless, I've lived on the coast all my life, and as I say, I intend to live there the rest of my life. My grandfather was a sharecropper. He didn't own the land. He worked the land. I can remember my dad taking me down a dirt road whenever we were at homecoming and him just telling us, we used to live here, we used to live here, we used to live here. They lived wherever the land was they were working. My dad left the tobacco fields of Cobbtown and Tattnall County and went to Savannah and got a job at Union Bag, working shift work in the paper mill. He told me when he got that job, he said, son, I took every penny I had in my pocket and I put gas in my car. And he said, I rolled the windows down. I just rode around hollering out the window. I got a job at Union Bag. I got a job at Union Bag. He was so happy to have that job. He provided for my family and I left home the day I turned 18. It wasn't, oh, I'm 18, I'm out of here. It just happened to be the day I turned 18. Went up to Young Harris College, then went to University of Georgia. When I left home, I swore up and down I'd never go back. The first thing I did when I graduated was go straight back home. That period of time, my dad went from being the dumbest man I'd ever met to the smartest man I'd ever met. I don't know how that happened, but it did happen. Didn't want to live in Port Wentworth, so I moved to Pooler, and I lived in Pooler from 1980 until just, as I say, 2 years ago when we moved to St. Simon's. And I opened my own. I worked for someone for 8.5 years when I first got out of school. Then I opened my own pharmacy on November 21st, 1988. Grew it to 3 pharmacies, and I had another business that serviced nursing homes and personal care homes, and that's where I really had most of my business success and did very well in that area. But did well with the pharmacies too. But knew I needed to get involved in the community. I wanted to give back to a community that had given so much for me, so I volunteered. I volunteered on the Planning and Zoning Committee and served on that. And then I ran for city council. Then I ran for mayor. Then I ran for state rep. Then I ran for state senate. Then I ran for Congress. Now I'm running for the United States Senate. I can't keep a job. So, but it really has been the American dream. In this Senate race, we've got 3 primary candidates. And one of them's the son of a legendary football coach. Another one's the son of a congressman. I'm the son of a shift worker in a paper mill. So I don't think anybody's going to be voting for me because my dad was J.T. Carter. But at the same time, if they knew him, they'd vote for him.
There's something to be said for that hard work and the dedication and having to struggle through life. I know my grandparents, were through the Depression. My father lived through the Great Depression, and it just builds something in terms of character and integrity in a person.
It does. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's like the story of so many Georgians. And that's why I want to go to the United States Senate, because I feel like I can represent the values of Georgians. And I don't think they're being represented now by someone who was born with a silver spoon in their mouth and who does not represent the values of Georgians, like John Ossoff. He represents the values more of AOC and Bernie Sanders that he does of Georgians. But we need somebody who understands hard work, who has built a business, someone who has served with experience, and All of those things are extremely important, and that's why I've been someone who has supported President Trump and his America First policies, and that's why I feel like I'm the one who can beat John Ossoff, and I'm the one that needs to be in Washington D.C. in the Senate representing Georgia voters.
Well, the people who watch our programs, and we love to do long form interviews. So for people who love that, one of their favorite questions that I will ask is, what is your most cherished childhood memory?
That's an easy one. It's going fishing with my dad. We lived in Port Wentworth, as I say, which is right on the Savannah River. I live less than a mile away from the Savannah River. We actually live closer to Hilton Head than we did to Tybee Island. So when my dad and I would go fishing, we'd go over to South Carolina and go to Hilton Head, and we would fish and in the brackish and the salt water. And without question, that is my most cherished memories, is just going fishing with my dad. And we used to catch so many fish, and it was so much fun. And I loved it so much. And that's one thing that really baffles me, is that a lot of the environmentalists think that Republicans don't care about our environment. I love our environment. I mean, I grew up on the coast. I represent the entire coast of Georgia. Yes, I love our environment. I want my children, my grandchildren, to have the same memories, the same experiences that I had going fishing. And that's why I work so hard for the environment, and that's why I work so hard for the coast.
Awesome. Love that memory too. Hey,
Yeah.
you're listed as a MAGA warrior. So
Mhm.
tell us, what does the MAGA movement mean to you?
What it means to me is the America First policies that President Trump has put forth. I would submit to you that in the first 9 months of his second administration that we are currently in, that he has achieved more than any single president in the modern history of our country. Look at what we've done. We passed the one big beautiful bill, which we're calling the Working Families Tax Act now, that did away with taxes, eliminated taxes on tips, eliminated taxes on overtime, and decreased taxes on Social Security, increased child care tax credits, all the things that it did for our economy. President Trump promised two main things in his election. He promised he'd make our country safer and more prosperous. He's made it more prosperous with the one big beautiful bill, the Working Families Tax Act. He's made it more prosperous that way. He's made it safer. He's secured our border. He is securing our cities, making them safer so that we can walk down the sidewalk in a major city without fear, without having to be accosted. All of those things the president has delivered on, those America First policies and the foreign policy that he has enacted, to me, that's what MAGA is all about. It is making sure that we're putting America first, and that we are taking care of our country, and making it more prosperous and making it more safe.
If you had said 15 years ago that Donald Trump was going to be president of the United States and that his cabinet would consist of several key Democrats, who mostly with Kennedy, especially one of the keynote Democrats, and they were going to have this type of success. How do you look at Trump's cabinet picks, and how would you rate the job that they're doing in their individual departments?
I think they're doing a great job, and I think he's learned. I think he learned a lot of important lessons during his first term, and he has put those lessons to work in his second term. I think he's got some great cabinet members. You mentioned Bobby Kennedy, who happens to be a good friend of mine, and I appreciate Bobby Kennedy and what he's trying to do, and what I describe as the radical translation and transparency of healthcare, making sure that people are educated and understand about healthcare, letting doctors and pharmacists decide and educate members of our society about healthcare, instead of the government saying, oh, you've got to have this shot, you got to have this shot. Instead of that, and there are some shots that we do have to have, but instead of that, letting people decide, letting them be educated. So the radical transparency that he's brought to healthcare, I applaud. I think he's done a great job. Kristi Noem's a good friend. She's doing a great job with we served in the House together. She's doing a great job. I know Marco Rubio. I know, I know all of them. Sean Duffy and I served in the House together. He's doing a great job in transportation. So I think the president's done a great job with surrounding himself with good people. And it's not hard to figure out. As I said, I was in business for 32 years, and I understood. I mean, management's pretty easy. All you do is you surround yourself with good people and you let them go at it.
I thought Ronald Reagan was a great communicator and could really, warm up a crowd, whether it was the news media or political adversaries or whatever. But I watched Trump's televised public signings of all the executive orders, and he turns them into kind of like a quasi press conference. And I have never seen the openness and the transparency in a presidency like I see with Donald Trump.
And you see it with Donald Trump. Let me tell you, I've been around him a lot, a whole lot, and he truly is a sincere guy, and he truly is a nice person. New Yorkers use different language than we use down here in the South. I will admit that. But aside from that, he is a great guy, and he really does care. I think that's the difference and Donald Trump and a lot of other people is that he really does care. He wants this country to succeed, and I want this country to succeed. He wants our citizens, our businesses. He wants to see success here.
Hey, give us some of your proudest moments as a representative in the House of Representatives.
Well, obviously, being a pharmacist, one of my proudest moments is whenever we've been able to make an impact on healthcare, and we were able to do that. Right now, prescription drug prices are too high, and the president is addressing that, and he's doing it in a good way, and I appreciate what he's doing. There's a lot more work to be done. We've got to eliminate the middlemen, the people who are really causing the prices to go up, the invisible people you can't see. It's the insurance companies that are doing it. We've got to eliminate them. But one of the things that I did, and one of the things that bothered me so much when I had my business was that I was if you signed a contract with a PBM, you could not tell the patient if they were to pay cash for it that it'd be cheaper. In other words, you had to let them pay their copay, which may have been more than if they just simply paid for it. It was
Wow.
called a gag clause. I was able to get that removed so that pharmacists can actually go out now and tell a patient, hey, your copay is going to be $30, but if you pay for this, it's only going to be $12. So don't use your insurance. Just pay for it.
And I love the president's point, especially with this new Pfizer agreement, where we were left holding the bag for all the R&D for the pharmaceutical industry while the rest of the Western Hemisphere just ate off of us. And it was just really pathetic that we've let that go on for so long.
It is, and the president is addressing that, and America is the key and the capital of R&D. On my years of practice of pharmacy, I've seen nothing short of miracles as a result of research and development. And I don't want that to be deterred. I want that to continue on. But look, these other countries have got to pay the fair price as well, and they've got to share in our investment in research and development. We encourage these companies to invest in research and development. They do. And we deserve to be able to reap the benefits of that as well and not have to just give it to other countries.
One of the hard lessons we learned during the pandemic crisis was we had all our pharmaceuticals being manufactured abroad, along with chips and various other things that were of strategic importance. Are we bringing those back on shore now?
We are bringing them back on shore. I'd like to share a quick story with you. In Congress, I serve in the doctor's caucus and as a pharmacist, and we were meeting with the ASPR, Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Emergency Response. Bob Cadillac, Dr. Cadillac told us, he said, we didn't know about the pandemic. We didn't know about the virus until February or March of 2020. He said they went and looked back and they noticed a downtick in the amount of medication and amount of PPE that China was sending over here in the fall of 2019. China knew what was going on. They knew what was about to happen. They started hoarding that stuff and not sending it to us. That teaches us an important lesson. We talk often about energy independence, and that's important, but we also have to have pharmaceutical independence. We got to make sure we're not depending on these other countries for our pharmaceuticals, or we're going to be in a mess like we almost got in during the pandemic. That's why it's important that we bring these companies back. In 2003, almost 75% of the drugs that you took were manufactured here in America. In 2023, that number was down to about 37%. We've got to get that back up again and get manufacturing of pharmaceuticals back here in America. And the president's helping us with that. I've got legislation made in America that will encourage and entice companies to come back with tax incentives. All of those things we've got to work together on.
That's awesome. Well, we definitely need it, and that was a hard lesson to learn. I mean, just thank God it wasn't a war situation or something like that where it would have been even more catastrophic. Who's going to win the government shutdown battle?
Let's face it, and let's be clear about this. This is the Schumer shutdown. This is a shutdown that Chuck Schumer, that John Ossoff, and the Democrats and the Senate have started, and it's up to them to end it now. We did our job in the House. We passed a clean CR, a clean continuing resolution to carry us through the next 7 weeks until November 21st. I voted to keep our government open. I voted for that, to keep our government open, to pay our troops, to make sure that our Social Security checks got to people, to make sure that veterans are getting their benefits, make sure that we keep the parks and everything open. John Ossoff, Chuck Schumer, and the Democrats voted against that. They wanted to shut it down, and they are going to be the ones who take the blame for this. It is the Schumer shutdown.
And I noticed too that even CNN was playing some monologues of Schumer's past comments on the government shutting down. I don't think he has a leg to stand on because he voted for the CRs before, the exact same one. And he said shutting the government down is, a horrible thing to do. So, how do you think this ends? And is the Trump administration going to use this as a tool possibly to eliminate some government jobs? Because I've been told there's like 100,000 employees that have already gone into the early retirement program once the government shut down.
Well, let's face it, we know we've got a bloated bureaucracy, and the president knows that as well. And yes, he is going to he's going to let some people go during the shutdown. But let's make sure who is responsible for that. The people who are responsible for that are John Ossoff, Chuck Schumer, and the Democrats in the Senate. If people lose their job, it will be because of them, because they shut the government down. And let's make sure we understand what they're trying to achieve here. They want to spend $1.5 trillion more of your hard earned taxpayers' money. That's what they want to do. They want to give illegal immigrants access to health care. They want them on the programs that are meant for American citizens, like Medicaid, which is meant for the most vulnerable in our society, is a safety net program. They want illegals to be on that program. John Ossoff voted to allow them to be on that program. John Ossoff also voted against the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which would have increased taxes $5,000 per year on Georgians. John Ossoff does not represent the values of Georgians. That's why we need someone in the Senate who has proven that they are going to support President Trump and his America First policies, and they're going to represent the values of Georgians.
Let's talk about too the tariff strategy from the president. I've actually heard some talk that there could be a way to use tariffs to actually reduce the deficit. So, I mean, what's your evaluation of the tariff situation?
Well, let's face it, this has gone on for too long. There's been a trade imbalance for too long here in this country. And the longer you let something go on, the harder it is to address it. That's why this is hard. This is not easy. It's not easy on anyone, but I applaud President Trump for what he is doing. And yes, we can use those revenues to decrease our budget. We don't have a revenue problem here in America. We got a spending problem, and that's where we've got to address is our spending. That's where the problem is. But these tariffs are a useful tool to help us get our revenues up. I don't want us just to spend it away. I want us to use it to decrease our deficit. Right now, we are spending more on the interest on our debt than we are on defense. The number one responsibility of the federal government is to protect our homeland, protect our citizens, and yet we're spending more on the interest, not paying down the debt, just the interest on our debt than we are on defense.
Yes, it's a shame. It's absolutely a shame. Hopefully, we'll get that together. And the let's just to shift a little bit. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, massive wake up call regarding domestic terrorism. What do you think is the solution for us in terms of battling domestic terrorism?
Well, the solution, I think, is the internet's a culprit here. I think that the media a lot has a big influence on it as well. But what happened to Charlie Kirk should never happen in this country. We are not a country of political violence, and this was political violence. But I have to tell you, in my years of life, I don't think I've ever seen a spiritual revival like I've seen come about as a result of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. our thoughts and prayers go with his family, with Erica and their children. And I can only imagine the pain that they're suffering through now. But let me tell you, there's a spiritual reawakening as a result of what Charlie Kirk suffered through and what he taught. He taught us that we needed to have conversation, that we needed to have discussion about issues, that we could talk our way through these and resolve our differences. And that's the lesson that we should learn.
And it sounds like the new DOJ strategy is going after the money, the funding sources for this terrorism, because many of people who are the knowledgeable pundits have said, get rid of the money, attack the money, and then the terrorism will go away because they're doing it because they're getting paid to do it. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I mean, let's face it, anytime you want to get someone's attention, that's the way you get it, is through their pocketbook. And that's the way this administration is trying to get these groups' attention. And I think it's going to work, and I think it is working.
As a Senator Carter, what would be your definition of success at the end of Trump's 4 years? What would you consider to be a smashing success?
Well, as a senator supporting President Trump and his America First policy and representing the values of Georgians. Look, John Ossoff, who has two daughters, voted against prohibiting men, biological men, from participating in girls' sports. I've got six granddaughters. I do not want my biological man in their locker room. I don't want them having to compete against biological men. I feel that way because I've got six granddaughters. 75% of Georgians said that they wanted him to vote against that. But he didn't. He's not representing the values of Georgians. That's why we've got to have a change in the Senate. That's why we're working our tail off to get rid of Ossoff.
As the father of two daughters, I'm right with you. Fought that battle, and I'm so glad that the state, at least, has taken the appropriate action, and the Trump administration is taking the appropriate action. But we've got to have people in there, like you said, who's going to pay attention to those types of issues, because it's just common sense. Those are the 80% issues. There are so many 80% issues that they cannot. The Democrats I'm talking about cannot seem to get on board and vote for those issues.
It seems like on the 2080, they're always with the 20, and it just baffles me, and I don't understand it.
Well, with the Senate on a razor's edge between parties, explain to the audience just how critical this Senate race is in Georgia to the nation at large, and what can happen or cannot happen in the Senate based on this race.
Well, first of all, in Georgia, every statewide elected office in Georgia is held by a Republican except for our two senators. And we know how that happened. It happened in 2020 when President Trump lost the election. We went into runoffs. People stayed at home. They were disenchanted with the voting process and didn't trust it. So they stayed at home. And this is what happens when you don't get out and vote. You get two Democratic senators in a red state. It did make a difference in the Senate and made a difference in the trajectory of our country and our government, because it gave the Democrats the majority. And when they had the majority in the House and the Senate and in the White House as well, then they enacted their values and their policies. And we had open borders. We had all kind of wokeness that was impacting us. That's why we've got to get control back of the Senate. Now, we do have a small majority now in the Senate, but we can improve and increase that majority. Listen, Georgians deserve someone in the United States Senate who is going to support President Trump and his America First policies. President Trump deserves someone from Georgia who's going to do that. He won the state of Georgia overwhelmingly in the last election. He deserves that.
Well, I do know your opponent, John Ossoff, tends to get a lot of his money from outside of the state of Georgia, in particular California, with a lot of billionaires out of Silicon Valley. And there's the pundits joking in the background that he's doing a great job of representing Silicon Valley and not Georgia. What do you got to say about all that funding coming from outside the state?
Well, and that just proves to you he does not represent the values of Georgians. He represents the values of Californians, of Illinois, of New York, the blue states, more so than he does the values of Georgians. His values, his votes don't align with our votes. He's for open borders. He's for biological men and girls' sports. He's for an increase in taxes of $5,000. He voted to shut the government down. I voted to keep the government open. All of those are differences, and that's why I'm going to defeat John Ossoff, and I'm our best candidate in the Republican primary to do just that, to beat John Ossoff.
Well, you've been so gracious with your time, Representative Carter, and I know that you've got a busy campaign schedule. How can voters find out more about you or help you with your campaign?
BuddyCarter.com.
BuddyCarter.com. And we so appreciate you. And you're coming to my Fayette County this evening, and you're going to be attending a fundraising gala. And we really appreciate you coming to share with us in Fayette County. Look forward to seeing you. And best of luck in the election. And we're going to be plugging for you.
Thank you very much.